It had been 3 days since the dinner table slap. 3 days since the room went silent except for the crack of her hand against my cheek. 3 days since I walked out with nothing but my coat, my phone, and the brass key I always kept in my pocket. And on the fourth morning, as I stood outside a small cafe on Willow Street, sipping burnt coffee and watching commuters stream past, I finally felt the shock thaw enough for anger to move. The moment that shattered everything hadn't even lasted 10 seconds. Her family's long oak table, the clink of cutlery, the glow of the chandelier, then her voice snapping, "You're embarrassing me," followed by the slap. But the worst part wasn't the sting on my cheek. It was the expression on her mother's face, disapproval, yes, but also expectation. As if they all believed I'd apologize for being struck. As if they thought I'd earned it. In that instant, I understood. They never saw me as an equal. They had convinced themselves that because I was quiet, measured, and focused on maintaining peace, I would accept anything, humiliation, blame, even violence. My wife, Marissa, persuaded herself it was just a correction, something her family did when emotions ran high. She assumed I'd stay, smooth things over, behave. The visual collapse happened fast. I stood, pushed my chair back, and walked out. No shouting. No tears. No explanation. Because explanations only matter to people who care to listen. I didn't go home. I didn't check my messages. I didn't answer when her brother ran out into the driveway calling my name. Instead, I drove to the small business condo I kept downtown, registered under my name alone, something Marissa always dismissed as your quiet little workspace. She had no idea there was a second floor, or that the lease contained a clause few people ever read, a private residential allowance for the owner. It was meant for entrepreneurs needing late-night access. For me, it became something else, a refuge. Backfill came in pieces. The chipped mug on Marissa's kitchen counter I'd stopped using months earlier. The snide jokes her brother made about your wife being the real earner. The way her mother would rearrange things in our home to fix my taste. Signs of erosion I'd noticed but never pushed on, choosing calm over conflict. A choice I was done making. Now, standing outside the cafe with the city breathing around me, I scrolled through my phone for the first time. 12 missed calls from Marissa. 4 from her mother. 1 from an unknown number that made my stomach tighten, the HOA president from our neighborhood. Odd. Before I could think too long about it, the unknown number called again. I answered, keeping my voice steady. "Is this Elena Hart?" a woman asked briskly. "Yes," I said, watching a bus pass by. "This is Claire from the Lakeside HOA. I'm calling because your husband came by this morning requesting access to your shared files and homeowner records. He said you'd authorized it. I just need verbal confirmation." My blood cooled. "I haven't authorized anything," I said. "And I'm not with him." A pause. Papers rustling. "Then you should know he was trying to review the bylaw addendum on property separations. Something about clarifying occupancy rights." It seemed urgent. I felt it then, the shift from confusion to clarity. Whatever Marissa was planning next wasn't about reconciliation. It was about control. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Please don't release anything to him without written consent from me. Signed." Not verbal. Of course. I hung up slowly, the brass key warm in my palm. She wasn't calling because she missed me. She was calling because I'd disrupted the script they expected me to follow. And now her family was preparing their next move, assuming I'd stay uninformed. They were wrong. I turned toward the condo, already planning what I'd retrieve next: documents, contracts, copies of things Marissa never thought I'd keep. Because if they wanted to treat this like a power play, I would show them exactly how much power I actually had. And the first step was silence. Not absence. Not running. Strategic, deliberate silence. By the time I reached the condo, the early afternoon sun had turned sharp, slicing through the blinds and catching the brass key on my palm. Its weight grounded me. I unlocked the door, stepped inside the quiet space, and let the familiarity steady my breathing. The first scene came to me in jagged fragments: the dinner table, Marissa's hand flashing, her father's muttered, "She needed that," and the room's unnatural stillness while I tried to swallow dignity like glass. But I didn't let myself stay in that memory long. Scene first, backfill later. That was the only way to move this forward. I went upstairs to the small loft where I kept everything Marissa never bothered to ask about: files, contracts, the lease documents she once called your boring paperwork stash. I pulled out the folder marked Residential plus Business Rights and slid it open. There it was, buried halfway down the page, Clause 11b, outlining private residential usage and sole keyholder privileges. A clause Marissa had never cared to read. A clause she technically wasn't entitled to know existed. I placed the folder on the desk and exhaled. They assumed I had no fallback, no space of my own. They assumed walking out meant I had nowhere to go. They assumed silence meant weakness. These assumptions were about to become their blind spots. My phone buzzed. A text from Marissa: "We need to talk. Come home now." Another immediately after: "I didn't mean to hit you that hard. You shouldn't have embarrassed me." And then: "Mom says you're making this worse. Just come home and apologize so we can move past it." I stared at the screen, pulse steady. They still believed this was something I could be coaxed back into fixing. They still thought slapping me at a table in front of 12 people was something I'd soften around if enough pressure was applied. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Claire from the HOA. "It's Elena again," I said, walking toward the window overlooking the quiet parking lot. "If my husband returns, do not allow him access to anything connected to my name. And if possible, notify me immediately when he does." Of course. He was insistent earlier. "I bet," I murmured, watching a couple unload groceries below. One more question. "Did he say why he needed the separation records?" Another rustle of papers. "He mentioned needing clarity on occupancy after marital conflict. He said he was acting on the advice of his family." There it was. The motivation behind the slap, the fallout, the sudden urgency: they thought they could force me out of our home permanently. They thought if they moved fast, they could establish occupancy rights for him while I was gone. They thought I'd be too shaken to catch on. In that instant, I understood the true betrayal. Marissa hadn't just humiliated me at the dinner table. She slapped me because she believed I was someone who could be slapped into compliance. She believed she could shock me into a silence she could then use legally. She and her family convinced themselves that I didn't know the rules, the bylaws, the procedures. They convinced themselves that money and appearances would keep me from pushing back. They were already maneuvering. I ended the call politely, then spent the next hour gathering what they'd underestimated: records of home improvements done under my name, receipts for the down payment I alone contributed, correspondence from the developer about structural repairs, the property tax breakdown showing my separate income source. None of this guaranteed victory, but it guaranteed leverage. A knock startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. I moved to the staircase quietly and peeked through the front window. Marissa. Her coat was half-buttoned, hair wind-tossed, pacing in front of the door with that impatient flick of her wrist she used whenever she thought someone owed her attention. My breath didn't hitch. My hands didn't shake. Instead, I felt something close to clarity. She knocked again. Harder this time. "Elena, open the door." I stepped down the stairs slowly, each tread deliberate. When I finally unlocked the door, I didn't open it wide, just enough to show my face. "What do you want?" I asked. She tried to push past me immediately. "I want to talk." "Let me in." "No." Her eyebrows shot up. "No? Are you serious right now?" "Yes." She scoffed, an ugly sound, sharp as the slap she'd delivered 3 nights earlier. "God, you're being dramatic. My mother says you do this because you never learned how to handle conflict properly. We just need to have a conversation. You need to own your part." I stared at her. My part? You embarrassed me in front of my family, she said. You questioned my brother about the money he borrowed. You made everyone uncomfortable. So you hit me. She looked away for a second, jaw tight. I barely touched you. You slapped me hard enough that the entire table froze. Oh, please. Stop acting like a victim. I'm not acting like anything. She tried again to push the door. I held it firmly. Elena, she hissed. You need to come home. We can't leave things like this. And we especially can't have you living here. The HOA needs to know we're together for the occupancy forms. That's why I sent Michael to talk to them. So her brother went first. Of course he did. They were preparing a narrative. I'm not coming home, I said. She blinked, stunned, because in her mind, this wasn't an option. Don't be ridiculous. You can't just disappear because of one slap. I let silence stretch between us until discomfort made her shift her weight. Then I said, I know what you were trying to do with the occupancy rights. Her mouth froze mid-word. I spoke to Claire. I know your brother asked for documents on my behalf, without permission. I know you're trying to position the house as yours alone. That's not. And you thought I wouldn't notice. Her throat bobbed. Just once. Elena, she tried again, softer now, if we don't get ahead of this, I might lose everything. You know how my family is. You should have thought of that before you hit me. She flinched. Small, but real. I took a slow breath. Leave, I said. We'll handle any communication through writing from now on. She stared at me as if seeing a stranger. And maybe she finally was. This isn't you, she whispered. You never knew me, I said. Then I shut the door. I waited until her footsteps faded down the hall before turning back to the loft, to the documents I now needed more than ever. They underestimated me. They underestimated my patience. They underestimated the fact that calm doesn't mean powerless. This wasn't disappearance. This was preparation. The third morning after Marissa's doorstep performance, I found myself back inside a scene that felt both surreal and inevitable, standing at the long glass counter of a downtown attorney's office, the receptionist typing so loudly it sounded like a metronome for my pulse. My brass key tapped lightly against my palm, an unconscious habit I now leaned on to stay steady. I had walked here instead of driving. I needed my head clear, my steps deliberate. 2 days earlier, I'd sent Marissa a single message: all future communication must be in writing. Her reply had been predictable, angry, defensive, laced with accusation. But later that night, at 11:43 p.m., a second message arrived: fine. We'll do it your way. That shift told me everything. Her family was coaching her now. The attorney I met was a measured man named William Grady, mid-50s, composed, and sharp-eyed in a way that made people reveal more than they intended. The meeting began in a scene that felt almost anticlimactic: a small conference room, a carafe of water sweating on the table, and him flipping through the stack of documents I'd brought. Records, emails, renovation bills, each page a quiet contradiction to the story Marissa's family was already crafting. He paused on one page. Clause 11b, he said, tapping it with his pen. Most people never read this far. I do, I replied. That's going to matter, he said, sliding the document back. Your condo usage is fully protected. Your husband has no right to access or leverage it. And given the HOA's call, I'd say he's already attempted to do just that. I nodded. I need to know where I stand legally, before they escalate. He leaned back, hands steepled. Tell me precisely what happened at the dinner. The memory hit like a flashbulb: the clatter of dishes, the cold sting across my cheek, 12 stunned faces, and Marissa's whisper, "You're embarrassing me." I described it without embellishment. Facts, not feeling. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said one sentence that crystallized everything: "She struck you in front of witnesses, Then moved to secure property leverage while you were emotionally compromised. Yes. That's calculated. I know. He glanced at the brass key I'd placed on the table absent-mindedly. Tell me about that key. It's for the condo. I kept it with me long before any of this. She never asked why. A private space is power, he said. Especially when the other side believes you don't have one. He outlined my next steps with calm precision. File a preliminary notice regarding unauthorized attempts to access HOA records. Secure my financial statements and independent assets. Document all communication in writing. Avoid returning home under any pressure, emotional or otherwise. One more thing, he added. Your husband will try to appear remorseful soon. He'll want to meet in person. That's not for reconciliation, it's to test whether you're still pliable. I won't meet him, I said. You will, he corrected gently. But on your terms. And not yet. When I left the building, the cold air snapped at my face, bringing me back into the present sharply. Seeing backfill return. I walked toward Willow Street, stopping outside the same cafe I'd stood at days earlier. This time, I didn't feel lost. I felt composed. My phone buzzed. A message from Marissa, we need to discuss the mortgage. Mom says you're dragging this out. Can we please meet? Just the two of us. Then another, I said I was sorry for the slap. You're taking this too far. And the third, which revealed more than she intended, we need to talk before the HOA sends anything formal. Please don't make this a whole thing. They were nervous now. Good. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I called Claire from the HOA again. It's Elena. Any updates? She hesitated. That meant something had happened. Your husband returned yesterday with a typed letter, allegedly from you, granting him temporary access. It didn't match the signature we have on file, so we declined and asked for verbal confirmation. A forged letter. So they were accelerating. Please email me a copy, I said. Of course. When I ended the call, I leaned against the brick wall of the cafe, letting the weight of their desperation settle. They thought I'd bend. They thought I'd panic. They thought one slap and a forged letter could push me out of my home. In that instant, another realization clicked into place. Marissa didn't fear losing me. She feared losing control of the narrative her family depended on. In their minds, I needed them. Not the other way around. My phone rang again, an unknown number. I answered. Elena? This is Officer Ramirez with the 19th Precinct. My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed steady. How can I help you? We received a call from a Mr. Michael Connors this morning. He reported you as missing. He said your wife is extremely worried and believes you may be in emotional distress. Of course. A missing person report. Another tactic to force contact, paint me unstable, or create a paper trail they could later twist. I'm not missing, I said calmly. I'm at my business residence. Safe and well. Do you consent to us marking the case closed? Yes. And please note in your report that the call was made without cause. Understood. When the officer hung up, I couldn't help the quiet laugh that escaped me. Not amusement, more astonishment at how predictable they were. They were trying everything except accountability. I texted Marissa at last. We will meet tomorrow. Public place. Writing only until then. You'll receive a message with the location. Her response came instantly, finally. And then, we can fix this, Elena. But please don't involve anyone else. It'll just escalate things. I typed, see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. I didn't add the rest aloud. You asked for a meeting. You assumed I'd come unprepared. You assumed wrong. I went back inside the condo, opened the scanned copy of the forged letter Claire had sent, and began marking the discrepancies: signature spacing, header timestamp, font variation. Small details. The kind people overlook when they believe they're untouchable. By the time dusk arrived, I knew exactly how tomorrow's meeting would go. Not a confrontation. A collection. Of words, of tells, of errors. Proof for the reversal they never saw coming. The next afternoon, at precisely 1 p.m., I sat at a small corner table inside Birchwood Cafe, a quiet place on the edge of town where the windows fogged in winter and no one hurried anyone out. I chose the seat deliberately, back to the wall, full view of the entrance, the brass key resting in my closed hand under the table. My phone recorded audio from inside my tote, just in case Marissa tried to recast the scene later. Preparation wasn't paranoia. It was survival in plain language. She walked in exactly 3 minutes late, scanning the room with that agitated flick of her eyes she used whenever things weren't going according to plan. I watched her spot me, smooth her coat, and slide into the chair across from mine. "You could have picked somewhere less dramatic," she said immediately, not even offering a greeting. "A cafe? Really? You asked for neutral," I replied. "This is neutral." She huffed. "Fine. Whatever. Let's just talk." The scene opened quietly, soft cafe music, steaming cups, the muted clatter of dishes. A setting calm enough for truth to scrape without distraction. I waited for her to speak first. She always showed her priorities in that opening line. "Elena, you're making this bigger than it needs to be," she said. "You walking out, it made my family think something was deeply wrong with us. You embarrassed me." The word landed like a stone hitting the center of a pond. Embarrassed. Not hurt, not scared, not sorry. I didn't react. I simply said, "You filed a missing person report." Her cheeks flushed. "That wasn't me. That was Michael being dramatic. You know how he is." "And the forged letter to the HOA, was that Michael too?" Her jaw tightened. "I don't know anything about that." "You're losing it if you think." I slid my phone across the table. On the screen, the scanned letter, annotated in red with the handwriting analysis software Williams' office used internally. "Spare me the performance," I said. "The font mismatch alone gives it away." She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "Look, my family, when we're under stress, we handle things fast. Sometimes messy. You disappearing threw everyone off." "I didn't disappear," I corrected. "I removed myself from a violent situation. It was one slap." She said it too loudly, then lowered her voice quickly. "You provoked me. You cornered my brother. I asked him about the money he borrowed under my name." "That's just family business," she snapped. "And you embarrassed him. You embarrassed all of us." In that instant, I understood the deeper truth. Marissa didn't see the slap as a loss of control, it was, in her mind, a justified correction. A way to reassert hierarchy. And everything since then, the fake letter, the missing person report, the push to meet, wasn't about getting me back. It was about restoring a structure where I stayed the manageable, quiet one. I leaned forward slightly. "I'm not returning home." Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "Elena, don't be stupid. You can't just abandon your marriage because of one mistake." "I didn't abandon anything," I said. "You fractured it. And then tried to manipulate the legal aftermath." "Oh my God, you sound like a lawyer. Who put these ideas in your head?" I held her gaze. "You did. When you hit me." The silence stretched long enough that even the barista glanced over. Marissa exhaled through her nose, leaning back like someone trying to hold on to the fraying ends of superiority. "So what?" she finally said. "You want a divorce now? Is that where this is going?" "It depends," I said. "On how honest you're willing to be." Her laugh was sharp, humorless. "Don't talk to me like I'm some criminal. I made a mistake. You're the one who left. You're the one escalating. You're the one who's protecting myself," I said simply. She stared at me, lips pressed thin. Then, in a quieter voice, I need the house, Elena. You know that. My family will never let me live it down if you take things too far. There it was. Not love. Not regret. Reputation. You thought you could slap me, push me out emotionally, then push me out legally, I said. But you didn't check the bylaws. You didn't check who made the down payment. You didn't check the condo clause. And you sure didn't check what witnesses saw. Her arms folded defensively. So what? You're going to punish me? Humiliate me like I humiliated you? No, I said. I'm going to correct the assumption you made. Before she could ask, I pulled out an envelope and placed it between us. What's this? She asked, her fingers hesitant. Copies, I said. Records of your brother attempting to forge my signature. A log of your unauthorized HOA access attempt. Screenshots of your messages. A summary of the witnesses at the dinner table. And the preliminary filing I submitted this morning, not a divorce filing. A protection of rights petition. Her breath caught. You filed something against me? Not against you. For me. She shook her head, overwhelmed for the first time since any of this began. Elena, please. We can fix this. I'll talk to my family. I'll handle Michael. Just come home. We can pretend this never happened. I studied her face. The tremor in her lip wasn't love, it was fear of consequence. Fear of losing control. Fear of being seen for what she'd done. What you're asking for, I said quietly, is the thing you've always counted on, silence. Her eyes glossed with anger. You're throwing everything away. No, I said. You threw it the moment you hit me. I'm simply choosing not to pick it back up. A long, brittle silence followed. She whispered, if you go through with this, my family will blame me. They'll say I ruined everything. That's something you'll have to navigate, I said. I'm not responsible for your family's expectations. Her eyes hardened, realizing negotiation was over. So what now? I took the brass key from my pocket and set it on the table, not for her to take, but as a visible reminder. Now, I said, you follow the law. You stay away from the HOA. You stop trying to access anything under my name. And you wait for instructions from my attorney. You'd choose paperwork over your wife? I'd choose accountability over abuse. Her mouth dropped open. She wasn't expecting that line, clean, unflinching, final. I stood. We're done here. She didn't follow me. For the first time in years, she didn't try to pull me back with a command, a plea, or a guilt-laced line. She simply sat there, staring at the brass key she thought represented where I lived. But it represented something else entirely. Where I wouldn't return. Where she no longer had reach. Where her assumptions would no longer shape my reality. I walked out into the cold afternoon light, the door chime ringing behind me like a soft punctuation mark. My next steps were clear, measured, inevitable. She wanted a performance. She got documentation. And soon, very soon, she would learn exactly what that meant. The morning after the cafe meeting carried a strange stillness, the kind that settles right before a storm breaks, not loud, not chaotic, just quietly decisive. I woke early in the condo, the winter light pale against the blinds, the brass key cool beneath my fingers where I'd fallen asleep holding it. Everything from the day before replayed in sharp fragments, Marissa's denial, the forged letter, the quiver in her voice when she realized I wasn't bluffing. But it wasn't satisfaction that grounded me. It was clarity. Scene first, backfill next. I drove to the HOA office just after they opened. The lobby was modest, beige walls, a bulletin board with community reminders, a faint smell of peppermint from a diffuser someone had plugged in. Claire looked up from her desk as soon as I entered. Elena, she said, standing quickly. I'm glad you came. We actually had another incident this morning. Of course. She led me into a small office where a single folder lay on the desk, her hands hovering before she finally opened it. "Your husband stopped by again," she said. "He insisted you were lying to us. He said you were unstable, that you left the home in a dissociated state, and that you've been trying to weaponize paperwork against him." His words, not mine. I sat down slowly, controlling my expression. "Did he bring anything with him?" "Yes." She handed me a printed email. "He tried to show us this as proof that you authorized him to act on your behalf. But the timestamp was off, and the email address wasn't yours, just your name with a different domain. It was obviously fake." I examined it. A sloppy attempt. Wrong punctuation, wrong signature format. They didn't even spell my middle name correctly. That mistake alone told me who had fabricated it. Marissa's brother Michael was notoriously careless with details. "Thank you for not accepting it," I said. "We follow procedure," Claire replied. "But there's more." She hesitated. "He implied you've been threatening him. That you're planning something dangerous. He wanted us to file a formal incident report." My teeth pressed together. Not fear. Calculation. "Did you?" I asked. "No," she said firmly. "We only file when something verifiable occurs." And the inconsistencies in his statements were glaring. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was a preemptive smear campaign. Lay down the narrative early, make me look unstable, hysterical, vindictive. Then anything I did afterward could be viewed through their lens. But they made one critical mistake. They left a trail. Claire lowered her voice. "Do you want a written summary of his attempts?" "Yes," I said. "With timestamps?" She nodded. I figured. "I've already drafted it." When she handed me the envelope, the weight of it was richer than the pages inside: witness confirmation, procedural notes, and impartial record. Exactly the sort of thing William could use. On my way out, my phone buzzed. A message from William: "We received something interesting this morning. Call me when you can." I sat in my car, dialed immediately. "Good timing," he said. "Marissa contacted my office." That made me pause. What did she want? She asked whether we could mediate privately before things got out of hand. Her words. Then she attempted to argue that you were emotionally fragile and might be acting under outside influence. "They're trying to build a narrative." "Yes," he said. "But they're doing it poorly." My paralegal recorded the call. Marissa contradicted herself 3 times in the first 2 minutes. She's not strategizing, she's scrambling. I closed my eyes briefly. Scrambling people are dangerous, but predictable. "Do we proceed with the petition?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "And I want to add something." "Go on." I explained the fake email, the HOA visits, the forged letter, the missing person stunt, and the verbal manipulation. Everything documented. Everything timestamped. "And one more thing," I added. "I want a formal notice sent to Marissa's family informing them that any attempt to impersonate me or access my records constitutes fraud." William chuckled softly. "You're thorough." "No," I said. "They're careless. I'm just matching their pace with actual evidence." When the call ended, I remained in my parked car for a long moment, watching a child across the street kick slush off a curb. The simple innocence of it contrasted sharply with the calculated mess unfolding in my life. But instead of weighing me down, it sharpened the edges of my resolve. I drove to the house next, not to enter, but to observe. To see what assumptions they were still operating under. Marissa's SUV was gone. Her brother's truck was in the driveway. And someone, likely her mother, had placed a box of my belongings on the porch, as though the matter was already decided. As though I had been cast out. I didn't step out of the car. I didn't touch the box. That would legitimize their attempt. Instead, I took a photo. Timestamped. Documented. Proof of attempted unilateral property removal. As I lowered my phone, the front door swung open. Michael stepped out, spotted me immediately, and raised his arms in a disgustingly familiar gesture, half taunt, half dominance display. "You can pick your stuff up," he shouted. "Marissa says you're out." I rolled down the window 3 inches. "You don't have the authority to remove anything belonging to me." He scoffed. "You abandoned the house. That means you gave it up. That's not how occupancy law works. And you forged my signature yesterday." His eyebrows twitched, a tell. "Don't lie. I have the document." He paled for one breath too long. "Well," he finally said, voice louder now, "if you want to be dramatic, fine. But you don't get to play victim and then come crawling back asking for a share of the house. Marissa's already spoken to our family lawyer. She doesn't have standing to remove me," I replied. "And neither do you." He snorted. "Good luck proving anything." I smiled then. A calm, unfaltering smile that made him take one involuntary step back. "I already have," I said. Then I put my window up, watched him shout something useless into the glass, and drove away. Back at the condo, I laid out everything on the table like pieces of an intricate puzzle. The HOA records, the attorney notes, the forged documents, the messages, the box on the porch, the witness accounts. And for the first time, the shape of their plan became unmistakably clear. They hadn't just assumed I would return. They assumed I would fold. That I would be too ashamed, too shaken, too emotionally fogged to track the details. They assumed I'd cling to the idea of marriage more than my own self-respect. They assumed silence was my default state. In that instant, I understood the reversal that had been building quietly, scene by scene. Tomorrow, the petition would be served. Tomorrow, the HOA would deliver their formal statement. Tomorrow, the false narratives would collapse under the weight of verifiable facts. Tomorrow, Marissa and her family would discover that slapping me at the dinner table wasn't the turning point. Underestimating me was. And as the winter evening finally settled over the condo, I placed the brass key on top of the documents, a small symbol of the one truth they never accounted for. I had never been trapped. I had options. And I was about to use every single one. The petition was served on a Thursday morning so cold it felt brittle, the kind of cold that sharpens every sound. I was at the condo, brass key in hand, when William called to confirm delivery. His voice carried a crisp precision I'd come to trust. "It's done," he said. "The HOA packet and our notice were both received." Marissa was there. Her brother too. "Reactions?" I asked. "Messy," he replied. "Predictably messy. But legally irrelevant." I thanked him, ended the call, and let the silence settle around me. Today wasn't about emotion. Today was about completion, ending a cycle they thought I'd stay trapped in. Scene first, then the backfill, then the return. The scene began at 2:11 p.m. when my phone rang again. "Marissa." I let it go to voicemail. She called again. I ignored it. On the third call, she left a message so frantic the transcription blurred with repeated punctuation. "Elena, what did you do? You're blowing this up for no reason. Mom is hysterical. Michael is furious. You need to call me, now." The last line had a tone I recognized from years earlier, right before family gatherings, right before her mother arrived, right before anything that required me to be the quiet glue that held everything together. Except I wasn't glue now. I was distance. At 3:05 p.m., a knock echoed through the condo. Loud. Insistent. I walked slowly down the stairs, stopping at the window to see who had come. Marissa. Alone. She was pacing on the landing, coat half-zipped, hair disheveled, eyes wild in a way I had never seen, fear, not of what she had done, but of consequences finally reaching her. I opened the door only as wide as the chain allowed. "Elena," she said immediately, breath fogging the air between us. "We need to talk." Please. Don't do this. Do what? I asked, voice steady. Destroy my life. She gestured helplessly. The HOA is saying I committed fraud. Fraud, Elena. They told my mother they're filing a report. My job will hear about this. Our neighbors will hear about this. That's between you and the HOA, I said. Her face crumpled into something sharp. No, it's not. You did this. You pushed this. You're making everything worse. I tilted my head. The forged letter? The impersonation attempt? The false missing person report? I didn't do any of that. She swallowed hard. Michael, he didn't know what he was doing. He thought he was helping. Helping you get control of the house, I said. She shook her head violently. It's not like that. My mother said we needed to secure things because you left. She said if you stayed gone too long, you could take half of everything. She told you that? She told all of us that. There it was, the fracture behind the fracture. And you believed her, I said quietly. She exhaled like someone finally exposed under bright light. Yes. Because you left. Because you humiliated me. Because you wouldn't come back when I asked. What did you expect us to do? I expected you to respect me enough not to hit me, I said. And when you did, I expected you to take responsibility. She flinched at the word responsibility, as though it were a slap of its own. I apologized, she whispered. You defended it. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I was angry. You were entitled, I corrected. Silence stretched like wire between us. Then she said, voice cracking, please just withdraw the petition. Tell the HOA it was a misunderstanding. We can fix this if you just stop escalating. I'm not escalating, I said. I'm protecting my boundaries. Tears pricked her eyes now, but they weren't soft. They were desperate, the kind that appear when someone realizes their story is slipping out of their control. Elena, I can't lose everything, she whispered. You're not losing everything, I replied. You're facing the consequences of your choices. She pressed her forehead against the doorframe, one hand gripping the edge. I don't want a divorce, she whispered. I just want things back to normal. There is no normal to return to, I said. That was the moment she broke, not in a dramatic collapse, but in a simple, quiet understanding. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time in months, she truly saw me, not as her steady wife, not as the planner, not as the fixer, but as someone she had mistaken for weak. Elena, she said, almost inaudibly, I thought you'd forgive me. And there it was. The assumption. The core belief that had dictated everything she'd done. Not remorse for the slap. Not guilt for the manipulation. Not regret for the lies. She thought forgiveness was automatic. She thought I would always return to keeping the peace. She thought my silence was submission. But silence had never been weakness. It had been restraint. Carefully exercised. Carefully ended. I unlatched the chain, opened the door fully, and stepped out onto the landing. Her breath hitched. You'll receive the next documents in 3 days, I said calmly. After that, the process begins. You're really doing this, she whispered. Yes. Why? Because accountability matters, I said. Because boundaries matter. Because I matter. And because you made it clear I didn't in your home. Her shoulders shook once. Twice. Then she straightened, regaining a sliver of the posture she used to hide behind. My family will blame me, she said. That's between you and them. You're really walking away. I walked away the moment you hit me, I said. Everything since then has just been paperwork. She turned then, slowly, like someone carrying her own history on her back, and walked down the stairs. I watched her reach the bottom, pause, then continue into the cold afternoon until she disappeared around the corner. I went back inside, locked the door, and held the brass key in my palm, the motif of everything they overlooked. It wasn't just a key to a condo. It was the symbol of every option they assumed I didn't have. Choices. Autonomy. Space. Clarity. They saw me leave and thought I'd run. But I didn't disappear. I reclaimed myself. And as I stood in the quiet loft, sunlight glancing off the documents on the table, I understood the final truth. Justice didn't come from screaming. It came from receipts. From boundaries. From refusing to be reshaped by someone else's expectations. My marriage ended not at the dinner table, but in the moment I realized I would never again apologize for being someone who finally, unequivocally, chose herself. That was the real turning point. And I never looked back. Author's note. This story is ultimately about accountability and the quiet strength found in enforcing boundaries. No revenge, no theatrics, just truth, documentation, and self-respect. Justice doesn't require violence, it requires clarity, consistency, and the courage to walk away when a line is crossed.